Emily Johnson had spent the last 18 months working tirelessly for one goal: securing a massive $60 million deal with Haven Tech, a major player in the tech industry. It had consumed her days and nights, long meetings, negotiations, and countless hours perfecting every detail. Every step had led her here, to this moment, standing in the sleek, glass-walled conference room of Harbor Tech Systems, one of the fastest-growing tech firms in Mason City. The morning light streamed through the windows, casting long shadows across the boardroom table. The contract, signed and sealed, lay in front of Emily, her hard work finally paying off. As she placed the thick stack of papers on the table, her heart raced with pride. This was it. This was the moment she had been waiting for. Alexander Gray, the CEO of Harbor Tech, walked into the room with his usual air of perfection. His silver hair gleamed under the fluorescent lights, and his custom-made suit hugged his form just so. Emily could see his usual cold composure, but she was ready to bask in the glory of their success. Behind him trailed Vanessa Brooks, the VP of Operations, who had barely lifted a finger in the negotiations, but would no doubt take credit for the deal. "Emily, it's good to see you," Alexander said, his tone flat. "But we need to discuss something important," he continued, barely acknowledging the contract in front of her. He sat down at the opposite end of the table, his piercing eyes scanning her face. Emily raised an eyebrow, sensing the tension in the air. "What is it, Alexander?" she asked, trying to keep the excitement in her voice, though it faltered slightly under the weight of his seriousness. Alexander shifted in his seat, avoiding her gaze. "We're taking the company in a new direction," he said, sliding a thick folder toward her. Emily's heart skipped a beat, and she glanced at the folder in confusion. "Your position is being eliminated, effective immediately," he continued, as if those words were nothing more than routine business. Emily froze. The words didn't register at first. It felt like time slowed down as she stared at the termination papers in front of her, her hands suddenly ice cold. She had just secured the biggest deal in the company's history, the deal that would make Harbor Tech the market leader. But instead of congratulations, she was being fired. Vanessa, sitting beside Alexander, gave Emily a smug smile, as though she had been waiting for this moment. Emily tried to remain calm, even as rage bubbled up inside her. She knew what this meant. Vanessa Brooks would be taking over the Haven Tech account. Of course she would. Vanessa had the pedigree they valued, the Ivy League background, the polished resume. Emily's state university degree, her late-night efforts, and years of experience clearly didn't hold the same weight in their eyes. Emily could feel her blood boil. She had worked so hard for this moment, only to have it ripped away from her in an instant. "I don't understand," she said, her voice quieter now, almost a whisper. "I just closed the biggest deal in this company's history, and you're firing me." "Yes," Alexander said, his voice cold. "This is a business decision. Kendra will be overseeing the Haven Tech account now. She has the executive presence we need for clients at this level." He said it as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Emily looked up at Vanessa's smug expression, her lips pressed together in a tight smile. Emily had no doubt that Vanessa had been waiting for this. She'd been eyeing the account and Emily's job for months. It wasn't just the deal that had made Emily a target. It was her presence at the company, her drive, and most importantly, her authenticity, things that Vanessa had never been able to replicate. Emily signed the termination papers, her hand trembling slightly as she closed the folder. She didn't look up at Alexander or Vanessa. Her smile, though it never left her face, felt frozen, stiff, and forced. She had built this moment up in her mind. She had imagined celebrating with her team, receiving recognition for her hard work. But now she was being shown the door like a stranger. She stood up and walked out of the conference room, the echo of her footsteps making the silence feel even more suffocating. The glass doors of Harbor Tech closed behind her, but her mind raced. She had spent the last year working toward this very deal, making countless sacrifices, building relationships with people she thought valued her. Now, She was nothing more than a footnote in the company's history. But Emily wasn't done yet. As she walked through the empty lobby of HarborTech, the weight of her situation finally settled. The termination package was generous, of course. 6 months' salary, a tidy sum to keep her quiet. But no amount of money could make her forget the betrayal. She stepped outside into the bright morning, her breath catching in the cool air. Emily had been pushed out, but she wasn't going to fade into the background. There was something they didn't know. Rachel Williams, CEO of HavenTech, had made her a promise that wasn't written in any official contract. Emily would personally oversee the $60 million deal. And now, with no strings attached, she was free to make her own decisions. As Emily walked away from the building, her phone buzzed with a message. It was from Rachel. "Looking forward to seeing you on Monday for the kickoff. My team's excited." Emily smiled as she read the message. They hadn't told HavenTech yet. It was all about to explode. And she didn't have to lift a finger to make it happen. The end of HarborTech was already set in motion. 2 weeks earlier, Emily Johnson had been sitting across from Rachel Williams, CEO of HavenTech, in her minimalist office that was nothing like the corporate labyrinth at HarborTech. The room was simple, floor-to-ceiling windows, a few carefully chosen pieces of modern furniture, and a view of the city that showcased just how different HavenTech was from the flashy tech giants. Rachel didn't need a big office or a fancy suit to impress. Her brilliance and straightforward demeanor spoke for itself. It was a rainy afternoon, the sound of the raindrops tapping against the glass filling the otherwise quiet space as the two women discussed final terms of the monumental $60 million deal. Emily's heart raced as she flipped through the contract, her fingers brushing against the crisp pages. The deal was nearly closed, but Rachel had one more thing to say before finalizing it. "I need to know you'll be personally handling this transition, Emily," Rachel said, her voice calm but intense. She leaned forward in her chair, locking eyes with Emily. "This isn't just another corporate deal for us. This is a gamble. I'm not signing unless you're personally overseeing the entire implementation." Emily hesitated, the weight of the request hanging in the air. Grey Rock Systems, her company, didn't operate that way. Deals like this were typically handed off to account managers after the contract was signed. But Rachel was firm. This wasn't about corporate promises. This was personal. Rachel's gaze never wavered, and Emily could see that she wasn't going to budge. Finally, Emily gave in, her voice steady, despite the unease she felt inside. "I promise you, I will personally manage this transition. You have my word." Rachel smiled then, a rare, soft smile that hinted at respect. "I trust you, Emily, not your company." Emily's heart skipped. It was a strange thing to hear from someone at Rachel's level, a CEO who saw through the corporate facades to the real people behind them. They shook hands, a moment that felt both final and full of promise. It wasn't part of the official contract, but it was a commitment Emily would keep, no matter what. Little did she know, this handshake would be the one thing that would save her later. As the days passed, Emily threw herself into the final preparations for the deal, never mentioning her promise to Rachel to anyone at HarborTech. She kept it quiet. She didn't need to broadcast it. There was something about it that told her this would be important, her insurance policy for when everything went south. But little did she know, a storm was brewing just outside her line of sight. 3 days before the official signing of the deal, Emily overheard something that made her blood run cold. Her office door was slightly ajar when she heard the unmistakable voice of Vanessa Brooks, her supposed colleague and friend, drifting from Alexander's corner office. "She doesn't have the background for this level of responsibility," Vanessa said with disdain. "How's Emily supposed to relate to HavenTech's executives? Haven's all Ivy League, top-tier schools. How's she going to connect with them with her state school degree?" Emily's heart dropped into her stomach. She stood frozen, hidden just outside the door, listening in. "It's not about the background, it's about results," Emily thought to herself. But she couldn't say a word. Vanessa's words stung, each one a sharp reminder of how little HarborTech truly valued her. Alexander's voice cut through the air, his tone calculated. "The board's concerned. This is our biggest account yet. We need someone with the right pedigree, someone they'll trust. Kendra's been with us for years. She speaks their language." Emily's breath hitched. Kendra. Of course it was her. Vanessa and Kendra had always had their eyes on Emily's position, and now it was clear. Kendra was going to replace her. "We'll bring in a new head of sales," Alexander added, his words chilling as they echoed through Emily's ears. "She'll step in and handle Haven Tech from now on." Emily took a deep breath, feeling the rage build up inside her. Her entire body shook with fury. All this work, everything I've done for this company, for them, and this is how they repay me. They had been planning this for months, she realized. The deal she had worked so hard for was nothing more than a stepping stone to elevate Kendra in the eyes of the board. It was clear now. The fact that she didn't belong to their elite circle, she didn't go to the right school, didn't have the right connections, was the real reason they were pushing her out. Emily couldn't take it anymore. She backed away from the door, her hands trembling with rage and frustration. The sound of her own heartbeat pounded in her ears as she retreated to her desk, her mind racing. "I've worked twice as hard as anyone here to get where I am," she thought bitterly. But it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. That evening, as Emily sat in her apartment alone, staring out at the rain through the window, she couldn't help but feel betrayed. The termination papers had arrived just hours after she had secured the deal with Haven Tech. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table, but she didn't reach for it. The messages from Harbor Tech were pouring in, the company's legal team asking her to sign off on her exit, and Alexander himself calling repeatedly. Emily didn't care to answer. She wasn't interested in their apologies or offers. Instead, she turned her attention back to the text she had received earlier from Rachel. "Looking forward to seeing you on Monday for the kickoff. My team's excited." A small smile tugged at the corner of her lips. Rachel hasn't heard the news yet, she thought. They haven't told her. Not yet. But they will soon enough. And when they do, she'll know exactly what kind of company Harbor Tech is. But Emily didn't want to act in haste. She didn't want to ruin things prematurely. Sometimes revenge wasn't about doing anything at all. Sometimes it was about sitting back and letting the universe take care of the rest. That night, Emily made herself a quick dinner, leftover pasta from the night before. She sat cross-legged on the couch, still in her expensive work clothes, sipping wine and enjoying the quiet of her apartment. She thought about her promise to Rachel. "I'll make sure this deal goes through. I'll do it on my own terms." She didn't need Harbor Tech anymore. In fact, it felt like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. And with that, she finally realized this wasn't just about revenge. It was about something more. It was about freedom. And she was ready to claim it. Tomorrow, when everything came to a head, Emily would no longer be part of Harbor Tech's game. But she would make sure they understood just how much they had underestimated her. And Rachel, she would be the one to prove that Emily's promise, made in the quiet of a minimalist office, meant more than all the polished resumes in the world. Haven Tech had made the right choice. The next morning, Emily woke up early, her mind already racing with thoughts of what was about to unfold. She had spent years working for Harbor Tech, climbing the corporate ladder, only to be discarded the moment her value was no longer needed. But this wasn't just about what they'd done to her. It was about something deeper, showing them what true worth really looked like. She could already imagine the scene. Harbor Tech's grand signing ceremony would take place later that afternoon, a celebration of the deal she had worked so hard for. The conference room would be filled with cameras, reporters, and the company's top executives, all eagerly awaiting the moment that the deal would be announced. But there was a problem. Rachel Williams, the CEO of Haven Tech, wasn't going to sign the deal without Emily. She had made that clear. And when the moment came, when Grant Ellison, the now former CEO of Harbor Tech, introduced Vanessa Brooks as the new point of contact for the account, Rachel would know immediately something was wrong. Zaria wouldn't play their game. She'd never trust anyone else to manage the deal, But Emily smiled as she thought about it. The chaos that would unfold when Rachel walked into that conference room and found Vanessa standing there instead of Emily was inevitable. Rachel would not budge. Emily knew her. She was a woman of integrity. The deal would fall apart, and HarborTech would lose the biggest contract in its history, because they had no idea what they had until it was too late. But Emily wasn't done yet. The morning passed slowly, the hours dragging as she waited for the time to arrive. She busied herself with a few last-minute personal errands, ensuring that she had everything in order for her next chapter. Finally, the phone buzzed. It was a message from Rachel. "Looking forward to seeing you today for the kickoff. My team is ready to get started." Emily's fingers hovered over the keyboard as she typed a response. She had the chance to warn Rachel about the situation, tell her what was going to happen. But then she stopped. Some lessons needed to be learned firsthand. Instead of replying, Emily set her phone down, leaned back in her chair, and let out a quiet breath. This was it, the moment she had been waiting for. At HarborTech's headquarters, the grand signing ceremony was underway. The conference room was gleaming, the air thick with the tension of corporate drama. Champagne bottles chilled in ice, ready to be popped as soon as the deal was officially sealed. Reporters milled about, cameras flashing as executives mingled, their suits as polished as their smiles. Emily could already picture it. Alexander Gray, who had once been her boss, would step forward, ready to bask in the glory of the deal they had secured thanks to her work. He would welcome Rachel Williams to the room, shaking her hand and preparing to announce their monumental success. But Rachel would have questions. She would ask for Emily. And when she did, the entire facade would come crumbling down. Sure enough, as predicted, the scene unfolded exactly as Emily had imagined. Rachel arrived precisely on time, stepping into the conference room with her trademark confidence. She was dressed in her usual minimalist style, her sharp eyes scanning the room for the one person who mattered. Emily. The crowd watched as Grant stepped forward, extending his hand in greeting. "Where's Emily?" Rachel asked immediately, looking around the room in confusion. Grant hesitated. His eyes flickered with uncertainty as he spoke. "Emily is no longer with the company," he said, trying to sound composed. "But I'd like to introduce you to Vanessa Brooks, who will now be overseeing your account." The room grew silent. Rachel's expression hardened, her eyes narrowing in disbelief. She didn't even look at Vanessa. "No, Emily, no deal," she said, her voice as cold as ice. And with that, HarborTech's dreams were dashed in an instant. The room was frozen, the reporters too stunned to take photos. Rachel turned on her heel and walked out. No deal would be signed. The largest contract HarborTech had ever secured was gone. All the effort they'd put into staging the perfect ceremony was rendered meaningless in the blink of an eye. Later that evening, Emily sat in her apartment, watching the fallout unfold. Her phone buzzed with messages, many from her former colleagues at HarborTech. Marcus, the company's legal counsel, had texted her. "You dropped a bomb in the boardroom. Call me." She couldn't help but smile. The perfect little world they had built was crumbling, and Emily didn't have to lift a finger. Grant's calls were relentless, but Emily wasn't interested in listening to his excuses. She finally picked up the phone when she saw his name flash across the screen, but her tone was calm, almost casual. "Emily, there's been a misunderstanding," Grant said, his voice strained. "Zerion Knight is refusing to sign the deal without you involved. This is extremely problematic. Can you come in? We need to fix this." Emily let out a soft laugh. "You mean you need to fix this?" she corrected him. "You fired me, remember? You said I wasn't good enough." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Name your price, Emily," Grant pleaded. "Double your salary. We'll give you a VP title. Anything you want. Just come back." Emily leaned back against her couch, savoring the moment. For years, she had worked twice as hard, never getting the recognition she deserved. And now they were begging. But it was too late. No, thank you, Emily said, her voice unwavering. You didn't value me before. Now you're only interested in me because you're bleeding. Good luck with Rachel. I hear she's not one to break a promise. She hung up, blocking his number. There was nothing left to say. The next day, Emily received a text from Rachel, who had obviously been informed of what happened. I heard what happened, Rachel said, her voice filled with understanding. Come work with us at Haven Tech. We'll do this right, together. Emily didn't hesitate. I'm in, she replied, smiling. A month later, Haven Tech was thriving. Under Emily's leadership, the deal was moving forward without any of the drama or corporate politics that had plagued her previous life at Harbor Tech. As for Harbor Tech, the company's stock had plummeted, losing over 18% in value in the aftermath of Emily's departure and Haven Tech's refusal to proceed without her. Kendra Brooks, the woman who had taken Emily's place, was let go after the board cited her inability to maintain relationships with clients. The people who had once dismissed Emily, those who thought her state school degree wasn't enough, were now left wondering where everything had gone wrong. And as for Emily, she found herself finally in control of her own destiny. She had built a new team at Haven Tech, one that valued results over pedigrees, innovation over corporate image. No longer would she be overshadowed by those who believed success was about what school you went to or how polished your resume was. Emily knew that true value came from hard work, dedication, and integrity, things that no corporate label could ever define. 1 year later, Emily stood in her new office at Haven Tech, the glass walls offering a panoramic view of the city. Her state university diploma hung proudly on the wall, no longer something to hide, but a symbol of everything she had overcome. As she looked around at her team, she realized that this was just the beginning. She had built something real, something Harbor Tech would never understand. And for the first time in years, Emily finally felt at home. This is just the beginning, she said to her team, smiling. And she meant it.